Ensign Alara Vance didn't look at the main view screen. She couldn't. If she looked up from her cogitator console, she would see the planet Castellax burning. She would see the atmosphere turn into a swirling bruise of purple and angry orange lit from within by the lance strikes of the righteous fury. Instead, she focused on the green phosphor text scrolling rapidly across her screen, the reflection dancing in her terrified eyes. The air on the bridge smelled of recycled ozone burning incense and the copper tang of fear that no amount of purification scrubbers could filter out. Target Grid Sigma 77 locked, a servitor announced from the pit below. Its voice was a flat, lobotomized drone that made Alara's skin crawl. It didn't care that Sigma 77 was a habitation district. It didn't care about the schools, the manufactorums, or the people who had woken up this morning thinking it was just another Tuesday under the Emperor's light. Neutralize the servitor continued devoid of soul. Cult concentration eliminated. Civilian casualties estimated at 12,000 baud. Alara's finger hovered over her rune key. 12,000. That was a small city, gone. Vaporized in a flash of holy fire because Inquisitor Valdez willed it. Alara swallowed the bile rising in her throat. She was 24 years old, a graduate of the Naval Academy on Hydra 4, and she had never killed anyone until 3 months ago. Now she was an accountant of genocide. Acceptable, Inquisitor Valdez's voice cut through the bridge's hum like a whip crack. She sat on her command throne, a silhouette of rigid authority, barely glancing up from her tactical slate. Proceed to next grid. Alara typed the command. Her hands didn't shake, the discipline beat into her, forbade it, but her soul trembled. Acceptable. That was the word of the 41st millennium. But it wasn't the Inquisitor that made Alara Vance freeze. It was the figure standing by the starboard viewport. He wasn't Imperial Navy. He wasn't Astra Militarum. He wasn't even human, not really. He was tall, draped in a coat the color of dried blood, wearing a wide-brimmed hat that cast a shadow over eyes that glowed like embers in a dying fire. He stood with a languid, predatory grace, watching the world die, with the casual interest of a man watching rain streak against a window. His name was Alucard, and every soul on this ship, from the lowest bilge scrubber to the captain himself, whispered that they had a monster on board to kill other monsters. Alucard turned from the viewport. The red light of the bombardment washed over his pale features. He didn't look horrified. He looked bored. 12,000, Alucard said. His voice was deep, smooth like velvet over gravel, carrying a resonance that vibrated in Alara's chest. Just collateral. 12,000 versus 40 billion. The mathematics are simple. Inquisitor Valdez finally looked at him. Her face was gaunt, the stress of 3 months of constant purging etched into the lines around her eyes. Her mechanical hand twitched a tic Alara had noticed developing recently. "You're questioning Imperial methods again," Valdez said, her tone warning. "Just observing," Alucard replied, stepping down from the observation deck. The crew parted for him like water fleeing oil. Alara pressed her back into her chair, praying he wouldn't notice her heartbeat spiking. "In my universe, we fought to minimize civilian casualties. Here you calculate acceptable losses like inventory, because that's what they are." The silence on the bridge was deafening. No one spoke to an Inquisitor like that. No one survived speaking to an Inquisitor like that. Valdez didn't execute him. She just sighed, a sound of exhausted pragmatism. "The Imperium loses billions daily across the galaxy," she said, rubbing her temples. 12,000 to eliminate a chaos stronghold is a bargain. She leveled a glare at the vampire. You've participated in 17 cult purges in 3 months. You've killed over 4,000 cultists personally. Now you develop a conscience. Alucard chuckled. It wasn't a nice sound. Not conscience. Perspective. He gestured lazily at the tactical displays showing the smoldering ruins of Castellac's hive cities. I've killed more than 4,000, millions across centuries, but I always knew what I was. He stepped closer to the command throne, leaning in, his glasses glinting. A monster serving humanity's interests. Here everyone's a monster. The only question is, which monsters serve which causes? Alara felt a chill race down her spine. Here everyone is a monster. She looked at her own hands resting on the targeting controls. Was she a monster too? Profound Valdez said, dismissing his philosophy with a wave of her metal hand. Also irrelevant. She tapped her data slate, bringing up a new holographic display that floated in the center of the bridge. While you philosophize, new situations develop. 4 priority targets, all requiring your specific talents. Alucard studied the floating red icons. 4 separate threat assessments, each blinking with the urgent pulsing rhythm of a crisis. 4 separate threat assessments, each flagged critical, he noted. You're spreading me thin. You're the only asset capable of permanently destroying demons, Valdez countered sharply. Until we understand how to replicate your ability, you're irreplaceable. She swiped the air, expanding the first icon, a symbol of a sword piercing a book. Priority Alpha Grey Knight's investigation. Inquisitor Lord Kairos wants a face-to-face meeting, non-negotiable. Alucard's lip curled. The demon hunters who want me dead, who want to determine if I'm demon or weapon. There's a difference, Valdez said, though she didn't sound entirely convinced. She swiped to the second icon, a biohazard symbol, alien and jagged. Priority Beta Tyranid Splinter Fleet detected in system. Small but growing. Naval Command wants an assessment before committing fleet resources. The all-consuming aliens, Alucard mused. Lovely. Priority Delta Valdez continued highlighting a glowing green glyph. Necron Tomb activation on Morgalis Secundus. Xenos artifacts we've been studying suddenly came online. The entire research facility went dark. And Priority Gamma. She finished her voice, dropping an octave, becoming grim. Dark Eldar raiders have been watching you. We've intercepted communications. They're interested. Alucard raised an eyebrow. Interested how? In ways that should concern you, Valdez replied bluntly. The Drukhari are torture artists who have existed for millennia. They're fascinated by something that regenerates infinitely. Alara shuddered. The stories of the Dark Eldar were whispered in the lower decks, like ghost stories, tales of living furniture and symphonies made of screams. 4 threats, Alucard summarized, ticking them off on gloved fingers. All critical, all requiring immediate attention. You can't seriously expect me to handle all 4. I expect you to prioritize, Valdez snapped, pulling up a star map. The Grey Knights are 2 days out. That meeting is unavoidable. Refusing would confirm their suspicions. The Tyranids are 3 weeks from Morgalis Tertius. The Necrons are contained but unpredictable, and the Dark Eldar, she shrugged, operate on their own timeline. Alucard stared at the map. 3 months in this universe had taught him that the 41st millennium didn't have downtime. It didn't have peace. It was a constant grinding machine of crisis management, breathless panic, and impossible choices. "What about Thruskell?" Alucard asked quietly. Ilara didn't know the name, but she saw the reaction it caused. Valdez stiffened. The bridge officers nearest to them pretended to be very busy with their consoles. "The demon prince I'm containing," Alucard clarified, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "He's been restless lately, testing his prison more frequently." Valdez's eyes narrowed. "Elaborate." Alucard tapped his temple. "It's like having an angry god locked in my skull. Most of the time I can suppress him completely, but when I'm stressed or depleted, he pushes back, whispers, tries to influence my thinking." He leaned over the console, towering over the Inquisitor. "Consuming a demon prince gave me incredible power, but the cost is constant vigilance. One moment of weakness, and he might break free." "Can you maintain control?" Valdez demanded. "So far, yes," Alucard admitted. "But I don't know what happens if I'm pushed too far. If I'm forced to expend too much power too quickly." He met her gaze, the red embers of his eyes flaring. "What happens if Thruskell breaks free while I'm fighting Tyranids? Or during negotiations with the Grey Knights?" Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Ilara held her breath. This was the fear that kept the crew awake at night, that the monster in the captain's quarters would become the monster that ate the ship. Finally, Valdez spoke, her voice cold as the void outside. "Then I activate termination protocols and pray the Emperor protects us from the consequences." She stood from her command throne, the metal joints of her armor whirring. "But that's the worst-case scenario. Best case, you handle these threats sequentially, prove your value beyond question, and survive long enough to become the weapon the Imperium desperately needs." "No pressure," Alucard deadpanned. "You're immortal," Valdez shot back. "Pressure is relative." She pointed toward the blast doors. "Get to medical. Magos Hexus has your blood rations prepared, 20 liters. You'll need full reserves for what's coming." Alucard turned to leave, his coat swirling around him like a shroud of living darkness. He paused at the threshold, looking back at the Inquisitor. "Inquisitor," he asked, his tone unusually soft, "do you ever wonder if this war is actually winnable, if there's an end to this?" Valdez looked at him. For a fleeting second, the mask of the Inquisitor slipped, revealing a tired woman carrying the weight of a dying galaxy. "Every day," she whispered. Then the mask slammed back into place. "But wondering doesn't change reality. The Imperium fights because surrender means extinction. Victory is impossible. Survival is the only goal." She turned back to the tactical displays, to the burning world of Castellax. "Welcome to the 41st Millennium Vampire. This is forever." The medical isolation bay was a stark contrast to the Gothic clutter of the bridge. It was cold, sterile, and smelled of antiseptic and old blood. This had become Alucard's refuge over the last 3 months. The cell was austere metal walls, aggressive monitoring equipment that blinked with suspicious rhythm, and restraint systems that looked sturdy enough to hold an Angron, though Alucard doubted they would hold him if he really wanted to leave. Magos Biologus Hexus was waiting for him. She was more machine than human, a collection of brass servos, mechadendrites, and optical lenses, draped in the red robes of Mars. On the table, arranged in precise, obsessive rows, were blood packs. Subject Vampire Unknown 01. Hexus greeted, her voice a synthesized monotone that grated on Alucard's enhanced hearing. Physiological assessment required before deployment. Comply. Still calling me that? Alucard muttered, hopping onto the cold examination table. After 3 months and 17 missions, I haven't earned a better designation. Designations are for cataloged species. You remain uncatalogued, Hexus replied, her servo arms deploying like the legs of a metallic spider. Scanners hummed to life, bathing him in harsh green light. Biological impossibility operating on unknown principles. Fascinating, terrifying, but not yet understood enough for proper classification. Alucard grabbed a blood pack, tore the seal with his teeth, and drained it in seconds. It was synthetic blood, nutritious, functional, but utterly joyless. It lacked the warmth, the terror, the life of fresh prey. But in this universe, you took what you could get. Warp contamination levels elevated. Hexus announced, her optical lens zooming in on his chest. 7% increase from last assessment. Demon's essence integration proceeding, but shows signs of resistance. Thruskull is fighting back more, Alucard confirmed, tossing the empty pack into a waste bin. Gets worse when I'm tired or stressed. Recommendation: reduced operational tempo. Allow integration to stabilize, Hexus droned. Alucard laughed dryly. Not an option. 4 priority missions pending. Hexus paused. Her primary optical sensor focused on him with a disturbing intensity, the aperture clicking as it dilated. Then recommendation amended. Prioritize survival over mission success. Your unique capabilities make you valuable. Your death or corruption makes you a liability. Touching concern, Alucard smirked. Not concern. Resource management, Hexus corrected, though her mechanical voice carried a strange tremor that might have been the binary equivalent of worry. However, observation. You have adapted remarkably to this universe. Many beings exposed to the warp energy you have channeled would be gibbering spawn by now. You maintain cohesion. Impressive. 5 centuries of practice controlling monsters inside my head, Alucard said, finishing the last blood pack and wiping his mouth. What's one more demon prince? Demon princes are not one more of anything. Hexus chided, retracting her scanners. They are ascended champions sustained by gods. You should not be able to contain Thruskull, yet you do. Physiologically impossible, psychologically improbable, but observed reality. Story of my existence. Alucard hopped off the table, rolling his shoulders. He felt the synthetic blood hitting his system, the sluggishness of the bombardment fatigue fading. He was full. He was ready. What's the Grey Knight's ETA? 37 hours, Hexus replied. They have requested a meeting at Morgalis Tertius Orbital Station, neutral ground. Alucard adjusted his gloves. Neutral ground. How polite. Hexus tilted her head, her mechadendrites twitching. They will attempt to kill you if they deem you corrupted. Probability 78%. Alucard grinned, a flash of white fangs in the sterile light. Only 78. I'm disappointed. Remaining 22% accounts for Inquisitor Valdez's political protection and your demonstrated utility, Hexus clarified. She moved toward the door, her servo arms folding neatly against her back. Grey Knights are the Emperor's finest demon hunters, enhanced beyond standard Astartes, psychically gifted, incorruptible by design. They are to Space Marines what Space Marines are to humans. She paused at the door, looking back. So they are very dangerous to demons. Yes, Alucard said, to you. Unknown variable Hexus word. You are demon-touched but not demon. contain warp essence but resist corruption. They may not have protocols for something like you." Alucard's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were focused on something far away, something ancient and violent. "Then this should be interesting," he said. Suddenly, the voxcaster on the wall crackled to life. It was Valdez, and the exhaustion was gone from her voice, replaced by razor-wire tension. "Vampire, report to Hangar Bay 3. We have a situation." Alucard pressed the comm stud. "What kind of situation?" "The kind where Grey Knights arrive 37 hours early," Valdez replied, her voice tight, "and are already boarding my ship." Alucard felt a stir in the back of his mind, a low, guttural growl that wasn't his own. Thraskull, the demon prince, sensed the threat. The hunters were here. "Get here now," Valdez ordered, "and try not to kill anyone unless I authorize it." Alucard moved. He didn't run. He blurred. The corridors of the righteous fury became a smear of gray steel and flickering lumoglobes. Crew members pressed themselves flat against bulkheads as a gust of wind and shadow tore past them. They knew better than to stand in the vampire's path. Up on the bridge, Ensign Alara Vance watched the internal sensors track the anomaly moving through the ship at impossible speeds. She gripped her rosary beads until her knuckles turned white. The monster was loose, and the God Emperor's angels had arrived to put it down. She just prayed the ship survived the collision. Hangar Bay 3 was a cavern of plasteel and tension, vast enough to swallow a cathedral, yet currently feeling suffocatingly small. Ensign Alara Vance huddled behind a stack of munition crates. On the upper gantry, a data slate clutched to her chest. Valdez had ordered a witness record of the meeting official Inquisition protocol in case everyone died, and Alara had drawn the short straw. Below, the deck plating vibrated, not from engines but from presence. A Thunderhawk gunship, painted in silver and heraldic red, sat steaming in the center of the bay. Its ramp was down, and from the shadowy interior, 5 giants descended. They didn't walk. They marched with the weight of mountains. Their armor was baroque, silver-gray ceramite, inscribed with gold lettering that hurt Alara's eyes just to look at. Purity seals fluttered like feathers in the recycled air. Grey Knights Alara whispered the name, tasting like ash. The Emperor's own demon hunters. Myths made metal. Inquisitor Valdez stood alone in the center of the bay, her hand hovering near her plasma pistol. A dozen ship security troopers stood behind her, their lasguns trembling. They looked like children facing a hurricane. Then the air pressure dropped. A blur of darkness coalesced next to Valdez, reforming into the tall, red-coated figure of Alucard. He adjusted his glasses, looking at the approaching giants with mild amusement. Grey Knight's Alucard drawled his voice, carrying effortlessly to the gantry. "You didn't mention they were so shiny." The lead Grey Knight stopped. He removed his helmet, revealing a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and scarred by lightning. His eyes were cold, hard voids that had seen hell and remained unimpressed. "I am Brother Captain Aurelian of the 8th Brotherhood," the giant announced. His voice wasn't loud, yet it drowned out the hum of the ship's engines. He didn't look at Valdez. He looked straight at Alucard. "And you are the abomination that consumes demons." With a sound like a thunderclap, Aurelian drew a force sword. The blade ignited with psychic fire, crackling with blue-white energy that made the air smell of ozone and burnt hair. "Defend yourself, creature," Aurelian roared. "In the Emperor's name, I will determine if you deserve existence." Every security trooper raised their weapon. Valdez stepped forward, placing herself between the vampire and the space marine. "Brother Captain," she shouted, her voice cracking with command authority, "this is my ship, my jurisdiction. You will stand down." Aurelian didn't blink. With respect, Inquisitor, demon contamination supersedes jurisdictional protocol. This creature contains a demon prince's essence. My chapter's entire purpose is eliminating such threats. He's contained it, Valdez argued, desperate, controlled it. He has used it to eliminate chaos threats across 3 sectors. 0 Imperial casualties. 0 recorded casualties, Aurelian corrected. The air around him began to warp, the psychic pressure intensifying until Alara felt a nosebleed start. But what corruption spreads unseen? What whispers has that demon planted? Alara watched terrified as the Grey Knight extended a hand. He wasn't reaching for a weapon, he was reaching with his mind. A psychic probe, invisible but palpable, slammed into Alucard. "Careful," Alucard warned, his smile faltering. "He's aware of you now." "I am very interested," Aurelian countered. "I have jeweled greater demons in the warp itself. A contained prince does not frighten me." The probe deepened. Alara saw Alucard flinch. His red coat rippled as if caught in a gale that didn't exist. Inside the vampire's mind, the barrier weakened. Thraskull, the imprisoned demon prince, sensed the intrusion and the opportunity. 10,000 years of rage hammered against Alucard's mental walls. "Don't," Alucard gritted out, clutching his head. It happened in a heartbeat. The vampire's control slipped, just a fraction. But a fraction was all a demon prince needed. Alucard's head snapped up. Warp fire exploded from his eyes, not the usual vampiric red, but a chaotic bleeding crimson. His shadow erupted, turning into jagged spikes that tore up the deck plating. And when he spoke, it wasn't Alucard's voice. It was a sound like grinding tectonic plates. "Blood for the blood god!" Alara screamed as the hangar bay erupted into chaos. Every weapon opened fire. Bolters, plasma lasguns, all pouring into the space where Alucard stood. The vampire dissolved into shadow, letting the storm of munitions pass harmlessly through him. He reformed 20 feet away, shaking his head violently, forcing the demon back into its cage. "Wait!" Alucard shouted, raising his hands, his own voice returning. "I'm in control." That was... Aurelian was already moving. He crossed the distance with speed that defied physics, his force sword swinging in a lethal arc aimed at Alucard's neck. This wasn't a physical blade. It was a psychic construct designed to burn souls. It would kill him permanently. Alucard dodged barely. The psychic fire singed his coat, leaving a trail of smoking fabric. He drew his twin hand cannons, the Kasul and the Jackal, but didn't fire. "Brother Captain, stand down," Valdez screamed, leveling her plasma pistol at the Grey Knight. "That is a direct order. That creature just manifested demonic corruption. You all witnessed it." Aurelian didn't stop. He pressed the attack, a whirlwind of silver and psychic lightning. If you cannot control the demon in combat, you are too dangerous to exist. Alucard was on the defensive, phasing and parrying with shadow-formed blades that shattered on impact against the Grey Knight's holy weapon. He was being driven back, crashing through supply crates. "I offer you the Emperor's peace," Aurelian intoned, raising his sword for a killing blow. "A clean death before Thraskull claims you completely." Alucard pulled himself from the wreckage. His chest was heaving, smoke rising from his shoulders, but he was smiling, a true jagged smile. No, Alucard said quietly. If you want to determine whether I'm corrupted, you'll have to work harder than that. He released his constraints, level 1. Shadows flooded the hangar, thick and viscous like oil. Eyes, hundreds of them, opened in the darkness, but there was no demonic taint, no smell of brimstone, just the cold metallic scent of blood. You want to test me? Alucard challenged. Then let's test. Aurelian paused. He lowered his sword an inch. Trial by combat, he announced. Ancient tradition. If you maintain control facing annihilation, you pass. If you surrender to the demon, I end you both. I accept, Alucard said. But when I win, you tell me honestly what you believe, not what your protocols say. Agreed. The hangar cleared. The soldiers fell back, creating a wide circle. Alara watched from the gantry, her data slate forgotten. This wasn't a skirmish. This was a duel between two apex predators of the galaxy. Begin, Valdez whispered. Aurelian moved first. He was a blur of psychic power phasing between reality and the warp, teleporting mid-stride. He appeared inside Alucard's guard, his sword driving for the heart. Alucard dissolved into mist, reforming behind the knight, firing the jackal point blank. Aurelian spun a psychic shield, deflecting the massive rounds into the walls. You fight like a demon, Aurelian accused, pressing the attack. Phasing, regeneration, corruption markers. I fight like a vampire, Alucard countered, dancing away from a strike that would have severed his soul. These powers are mine. Inside Alucard's mind, Thraskel was screaming, offering power. Just a little, the demon whispered. Let me in. We can crush this Tin Man. We can drink his soul. Alucard ignored him. He fought with discipline he hadn't needed in centuries. He memorized Aurelian's patterns. He learned. You're adapting, Aurelian noted, surprised as Alucard parried a strike perfectly. Demons don't learn. They repeat patterns. Does that mean I pass? It means you're interesting. Aurelian raised his hand. A blast of pure psychic force slammed into Alucard, stunning him. In that split second, the force sword plunged forward. It pierced Alucard's chest. Alara gasped. The blade emerged from Alucard's back, sizzling with psychic fire. The vampire fell to his knees, smoke pouring from the wound. Now, Aurelian whispered, standing over him, now is when the demon makes his move. When you are wounded, desperate, this is when he offers power. Alucard looked down at the sword, burning his insides. He felt his souls screaming. He felt Thraskel offering the key to survival. All he had to do was let go. Instead, Alucard looked up at the Grey Knight. His eyes were clear. Go to hell, he rasped. He grabbed the blade with both bare hands. The psychic fire burned his flesh to the bone, but he didn't let go. With a grunt of exertion that sounded terrifyingly human, Alucard pulled himself forward. He slid his body up the length of the sword, driving it deeper, just to close the distance. Aurelian froze, stunned by the sheer insanity of the act. Face to face with the Grey Knight, blood leaking from his mouth, Alucard grinned. I've survived 5 centuries by controlling monsters inside my head, he whispered. One more doesn't change that. He pressed the casul against Aurelian's helmet and pulled the trigger. Bang! The impact snapped the Grey Knight's head back. The psychic focus broke. Alucard ripped himself off the blade, staggering back as the wound in his chest began to knit together, steaming. Silence descended on the hangar. Aurelian slowly removed his helmet. There was a crack in the ceramite forehead. He touched it, then looked at Alucard with something new in his eyes. respect. Remarkable, the captain said. Most beings would have surrendered to any power source rather than endure that pain. You chose suffering over corruption. It's kind of my thing, Alucard wheezed, his chest reforming. Aurelian sheathed his sword. But he wasn't done. One final test. I am going to reach into your consciousness and look at the prison directly. If I see a single crack, I kill you. Do you consent? Alara leaned over the railing. Don't do it, she thought. Run. Do it, Alucard said. Aurelian's eyes glowed. The psychic probe slammed into Alucard again, but this time it wasn't an attack. It was an inspection. Alara watched Alucard's face tighten in agony. The Grey Knight was sifting through his memories, his sins, the millions of souls swirling in his gullet. He was going deep to the place where the demon prince screamed in chains. For a minute that felt like an hour, neither moved. Then Aurelian blinked. The glow faded. He stepped back, looking shaken. My judgment, Aurelian announced, his voice echoing to the rafters, is that this being is not corrupted. He looked at Valdez, then up at the gantry where Alara was hiding, as if he knew she was there. He is a prison, Aurelian declared, a living prison that walks and fights and thinks. He contains corruption but is not claimed by it. He extended a hand to the vampire. Alucard hesitated, then took it. I withdraw my termination order, the Grey Knight said. This vampire is no threat to the Imperium. In fact, he may be its greatest weapon against chaos. Alara exhaled, sinking to the floor of the gantry. She looked at the data slate in her hands, her fingers trembling. She had recorded a monster, proving he was more human than the angels sent to kill him. And for the first time in 3 months, she didn't feel afraid of the man in the red coat. She felt hope. Magos Hexus had cleared the observation deck of Medical Bay 4, but she hadn't cleared the security feeds. Ensign Alara Vance sat at her station on the bridge. The graveyard shifts silence heavy around her. She shouldn't be watching. The file was flagged Vermilion clearance, but the encryption keys for the medical sublevels were notoriously old, and morbid curiosity was a powerful motivator. On her small, unauthorized screen, she saw 12 men and women in orange jumpsuits kneeling in a line. They were the dregs of the Righteous Fury's brig mutineers, heretics, murderers waiting for the airlock. Alucard walked down the line. He didn't look like the hero who had just earned a Grey Knight's respect. He looked like a predator inspecting livestock. I'm not asking for innocence, Alucard said to Valdez, who stood by the door, arms crossed. Just the strength your system is already planning to waste. Alara watched hand over her mouth as Alucard stopped in front of a woman with gang tattoos. He spoke to her softly. Alara couldn't hear the words, but she saw the woman's shoulders slump. A moment of acceptance. Then Alucard knelt. He didn't tear her throat out. He bit her wrist. It was intimate, horrifyingly so. The vampire drank deep, his eyes rolling back as he absorbed not just blood, but life. Alara saw the prisoner's skin go gray, her eyes dimming until she simply ceased. Alucard moved to the next one. Emperor, have mercy, Alara whispered. He wasn't just fueling up, he was loading ammunition. When he finished the 12th prisoner, Alucard stood. He looked taller. The exhaustion from the Grey Knight duel was gone, replaced by a terrifying vitality. He wiped his mouth, his eyes glowing with the stolen light of 12 souls. Strong, Alucard said to the camera, as if he knew Alara was watching. focused, ready. He turned to Valdez. Let's go find the Great Devourer. The mission target was an asteroid designated Sigma 779, a tumbling rock on the system's edge that scans indicated was blooming. Ilara was officially on duty, now assigned as comms liaison for the extraction team. Her headset crackled with the heavy breathing of Sergeant Corvus, the leader of the Imperial Guard Spec Ops squad, dropping with the vampire. Drop in 3, 2, 1, mark. The tactical display showed 20 green dots and one red one plummeting toward the asteroid. Through the helmet cam of Private Jenkins, Ilara saw the landing zone. It wasn't rock, it was meat. The asteroid's surface was covered in a thick, pulsing carpet of biomass. Capillary towers rose like cancerous trees, pumping fluids into the vacuum. The ground squelched under the squad's boots as they landed. Perimeter secure, Corvus whispered over the Vox. By the throne, the smell. It's like breathing inside a stomach. Contact, Alucard's voice cut in. He sounded cheerful. They know we're here. On the feed, the biomass erupted. Tyranids. Ilara had seen pick captures, but nothing prepared her for the live feed. They were a tide of chitin and muscle moving with a fluid insectile coordination that made them look like a single organism. Gaunts scuttled forward, teeth clicking, while larger warriors fired bio-cannons that spat acid beetles. Open fire, controlled bursts, Corvus yelled. Last fire lit up the gloom. Tyranids exploded in sprays of ichor, but more climbed over the dead. Vampire, you're up, Corvus shouted. Ilara watched the red dot on her map move. Alucard didn't take cover. He walked into the open, the Kasul and Jackal barking thunder. Bang, bang, bang. Every shot was a kill. Heads popped like ripe fruit, but the swarm didn't break. They didn't fear. Alucard phased into mist to dodge a scything talon, reforming behind the creature to execute it. Clever trick, Alucard noted over the comms, but they're learning. Repeat, Corvus asked, reloading. They're adapting, Alucard said, his voice tightening. Look. On the feed, Ilara saw it. A group of Hormagaunts charged Alucard. He turned to mist again, but instead of swinging through him, the Tyranids stopped. They spat a thick, viscous mucus into the air where the mist swirled. The chemical reacted with Alucard's shadow form. He solidified instantly, stumbling, his coat sizzling. Acidic countermeasures, Alucard hissed, shooting a gaunt in the face. They analyzed my phase frequency in less than 3 minutes. Sarge Jenkins screamed on the feed. Big movement, 12 o'clock. The hive structure ahead tore open. Something massive emerged, a hive tyrant. It stood 12 feet tall, armed with bone swords and a heavy venom cannon. Its head was a swollen crest of psychic power that distorted the camera feed with static. Synapse creature, Corvus yelled, fall back. The tyrant didn't roar. It projected a psychic scream that Ilara felt even through the void link. It was a command, consume. The swarm surged. The squad was encircled. Inquisitor Alucard's voice came over the general channel. We're trapped. Extraction is impossible. Hold position, Valdez ordered from the bridge. Naval strikes are spooling up. Too slow, Alucard said. The hive mind. It's looking at me. I can feel it. Ilara watched the biometric readings on her console. Alucard's heart rate wasn't rising from fear. It was steady. He was thinking. They want my biology, Alucard murmured. Regeneration. Immortality. They want to eat me and copy the code. Don't let them take you, Valdez warned. If the Tyranids integrate your abilities, we lose the sector. Terminatus protocols are ready. I have a better idea, Alucard said. Sergeant Corvus. Busy Corvus shouted, gunning down a warrior. When I give the signal run for the extraction point, don't look back. What signal? You'll know it. Alara watched frozen as Alucard holstered his guns. He stepped out of the defensive circle. He walked toward the hive tyrant, arms spread wide. What is he doing? Alara whispered. Alucard Valdez barked. Report. I'm letting them win, Alucard replied. Time to see who has the stronger stomach. The Tyranids parted. The hive mind, sensing surrender, ordered the swarm to halt. The hive tyrant stomped forward, looming over the vampire. It reached down with a massive clawed hand. Alucard didn't resist. The tyrant grabbed him, lifting him like a doll. It turned and walked toward a bubbling pool of digestive acid at the base of the spire. He's letting them eat him, Jenkins whimpered on the feed. The tyrant threw Alucard into the pool. Alara flinched as the telemetry flatlined. The vampire submerged into the boiling biological sludge. The acid was designed to break down organic matter in seconds. Signal lost, Alara reported, her voice shaking. Subject consumed. Wait, Valdez commanded. Watch. Down on the asteroid, the pool bubbled. The Tyranids waited, the hive mind processing the new genetic material. It was analyzing the vampire, taking apart his cells, ready to broadcast the secret of immortality to the entire fleet. Error. The word flashed across Alara's mind, a psychic backlash so strong the bridge lights flickered. The digestion pool didn't just bubble, it erupted. A pillar of shadow and red light blasted into the sky. The liquid inside the pool turned black. What in the throne? Corvus breathed. From the pool, a shape rose. It wasn't Alucard, it was a nightmare. He was 10 feet tall now, a hybrid monstrosity. His coat had fused with his skin, turning into armored chitin. His shadows had become solid, razor-sharp tendrils that lashed out like whips. His eyes were burning with a mix of vampiric red and Tyranid bioluminescence. He hadn't been digested. He was eating the pool. Run, Corvus screamed. That's the signal, go. On the screen, Alara saw the squad break for the landing zone. Behind them, the Alucard thing roared. It wasn't a sound of pain, it was a laugh. He raised a hand, and the shadows surged. He wasn't just killing the Tyranids, he was consuming their biomass, drinking the slurry of the digestion pool, and forcing his own consciousness up the psychic link. Inside the hive mind, Alucard wasn't just a virus, he was poison. He was uploading incompatible data, demon essence, human souls, individual ego, concepts the collective consciousness couldn't process. Chaos, fear, pride, Thruskell. The hive tyrant shrieked, clutching its head. The synapse link overloaded. Crack! The tyrant's head exploded. Around it, the swarm fell into confusion, screeching, attacking each other. The coordination was gone. The Alucard thing turned toward the camera feed just for a second. Its face was a shifting horror of mandibles and human features. Extraction Team, Corvus yelled, diving into the Valkyrie dropship. We are clear, dust off. As the Valkyrie lifted the camera, looked back. The biospire was collapsing, consumed by a spreading stain of black shadow. Alucard stood in the center of the ruin, his body convulsing as he violently rejected the alien DNA he had absorbed. Chitin plates cracked and fell off. Extra limbs dissolved into mist. He fell to his knees, retching, vomiting up gallons of black ichor as his body fought to return to its normal state. Mission accomplished, Valdez said on the bridge. She sounded terrified. Get him back on board, straight to isolation. Ilara stared at the screen. The vampire was human-shaped again, wiping sludge from his face. He looked up at the retreating ship and gave a weak thumbs up. Ilara realized she was shaking. She had seen him eat criminals. She had seen him eat aliens. And she realized with a sinking feeling in her gut that there was nothing in this galaxy Alucard wouldn't consume to win. The real question was, when would the Imperium be on the menu? The debriefing room was silent save for the rhythmic thump hiss of the air cyclers. Alucard sat in a reinforced chair looking surprisingly human for someone who had vomited an alien ecosystem an hour ago. He was drinking blood again medical stock this time, sipping it from a crystal flute he'd apparently looted from somewhere. The blood angels, Alucard mused, swirling the crimson liquid. Sounds dramatic. Do they live up to the branding? They are the Emperor's noblest sons, Valdez replied, pacing the room. She had changed into formal inquisitorial vestments, black velvet and gold thread. And they are the most dangerous guests we could host right now. Why? Because I am a heretical monster. Because they are also monsters. Valdez stopped leaning over the table. They suffer a genetic curse, the red thirst, a hunger for blood that drives them into berserk fury, and the black rage, a psychic psychosis, where they believe they are their Primarch Sanguinius dying 10,000 years ago. Alucard paused the glass halfway to his lips. Warriors fighting to remain human despite a biological imperative to be monsters. How relatable. Do not mock them, Valdez warned. They fight their nature every second of their existence. You embraced yours. To them, you aren't just an enemy. You're a mirror showing them what they fear becoming. The ship shuddered, the docking clamps engaged. They're here, Valdez straightened her rosette. Try to be diplomatic, and for the love of the throne, don't mention that you ate a hive tyrant. They might take it the wrong way. Ensign Ilara Vance had managed to secure a spot on the honor guard detail. It was a terrifying privilege. She stood rigid in her dress uniform lasgun, presented as the airlock cycled open. The blade of Sanguinius had docked, and the scent of incense and ozone flooded the hangar. Then the angels walked. They were magnificent. Their armor was blood-red polished to a mirror sheen, adorned with golden wings and teardrops of ruby. They moved with a grace that made the Grey Knights look like statues. The Grey Knights were weapons. The Blood Angels were works of art designed to kill. Leading them was a figure in gold, Commander Dante. His face was hidden behind a golden death mask, frozen in an expression of serene fury. Beside him walked a figure in black, a chaplain, his skull helm ominous, wielding a Crozius arcanum that crackled with dark energy. Ilara felt like weeping. To see one Astartes was a blessing. To see Dante, the oldest living space marine, was a miracle. And standing opposite them, slouching in his red coat with a bored expression, was the vampire. Inquisitor Valdez Dante's voice was deep amplified by his helm. It sounded like judgment. We responded to your distress call regarding the Tyrannid Splinter Fleet. Commander Dante Valdez bowed an actual bow, deep and respectful. Ilara had never seen her bow to anyone. Your assistance is honored. The Tyrannid threat is complicated. Dante removed his helm. His face was ancient, lined with centuries of war, but his eyes were sharp. They locked onto Alucard immediately. And this, Dante said, his tone cooling instantly, is the specialist I was briefed on." Alucard the vampire introduced himself, offering a lazy salute. "At your service." "Mostly." The chaplain in black stepped forward. He removed his skull helm, revealing a face ravaged by scars and a bionic eye that glowed with red menace. This was Lamarte's guardian of the lost. "I sense it," Lamartes growled. The air temperature dropped. "Beyond the Xenos taint, you carry corruption within you, deep, ancient." The blood angels behind him tensed hands, drifting to bolters. "I contain a demon prince," Alucard admitted casually, as if confessing to a mild cold. "Thraskull. Consumed him 3 months ago. He's currently in a timeout." "Heresy," Lamartes spat. "No being can contain a demon prince indefinitely. It corrupts. It destroys." "I've been doing it for 5 centuries, Alucard countered. "Well, not Thraskull specifically, but monsters in general. It's all about willpower and a very strict diet." Dante held up a hand, stopping his chaplain from drawing a weapon. The Grey Knights cleared him Lamartes. Aurelian sent his report. He looked at Alucard with a mixture of disgust and fascination, but the chaplain raises a point. "You speak of controlling monstrosity. We understand that struggle." "Do you?" Alucard stepped closer. The security detail, including Alara, flinched. "You fight your nature. You treat your hunger like an enemy. I accepted mine." "We fight because surrender is damnation," Dante said softly. "The red thirst is our shame. We master it through discipline." "You master it through repression," Alucard corrected. He looked at a young space marine standing in the back, Brother Cassius, whose hands were shaking slightly. The boy looked like he was vibrating with tension. "Look at him. He's terrified. Not of me, of himself." Alucard looked directly at the young marine. "The fear makes it stronger, kid. You're trying so hard not to be a monster that you're exhausting yourself. Acknowledge the hunger. Accept it exists. Then choose not to act on it. There's a difference." "Silence," Lamartes roared. "You preach the logic of chaos. Surrender to the urge." "Not surrender," Alucard said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "Integration. You have terrible power. Use it. Don't waste energy fighting your own shadow." The tension was thick enough to choke on. Alara gripped her laser gun, terrified that a war was about to start right here in the hangar. Then the alarm screamed. "Contact!" The voice of the tech priest blared from the voxcasters. "Multiple warp signatures, no. Correction. Necron signatures. Planetary surface more Gallus secundus. The tomb world is waking up." Dante replaced his helmet instantly. The Tyranids in orbit and Necrons on the ground. "We are pincered." Valdez pulled up a hololith. "The Tyranid fleet is disarrayed thanks to Alucard's unconventional diplomacy, but they are regrouping. The Necrons are emerging in force. 15,000 warriors." "We cannot fight both simultaneously," Dante assessed. "I have an idea," Alucard said. He walked to the tactical table looming over the map. "The Tyranids, they operate on a synaptic web. Hive mind. Collective consciousness." "We know this," Lamartes said. "I disrupted them by feeding them incompatible data," Alucard explained. "Individualism, ego, chaos. It broke their coordination." He looked at Lamartes. "You have warriors who are trapped in a psychic loop, don't you, men whose minds are broken, reliving a battle from 10,000 years ago?" The room went deadly silent. "The Death Company," Dante said, his voice cold. "You speak of our fallen brothers." "I speak of weapons," Alucard said. Warriors whose minds are experiencing a reality that doesn't exist. Non-linear time, past and present fused. That is fundamentally incompatible with the hive mind structure. Alucard pointed at the Tyrannid cluster on the map. Drop the Death Company on the hive tyrants. Let the hive mind try to consume that consciousness. It will choke on the black rage. The feedback loop will shatter their control network. Dante stared at the map. It was monstrous. It was using the suffering of his own brothers as a biological weapon. It is, pragmatic Lamartine whispered. Our brothers seek a glorious death, to die breaking the great devourer. It is a worthy end. Then we split the forces, Dante decided. The Blood Angels will deploy the Death Company against the Tyrannids. We will cleanse the orbit. He looked at Alucard. And you, vampire, where will you go? The Necrons, Alucard said, checking his guns. I've never killed anything that was already dead. Sounds like a challenge. Before the deployment, Alucard requested to see them. The Death Company was kept in the bowels of the Blade of Sanguinius, behind blast doors inscribed with warding runes. The air here was heavy tasting of copper and psychic static. Lamartine led Alucard to the observation gallery. Below, in a reinforced chamber, 23 Space Marines paced like caged tigers. Their armor was painted black, marked with red saltires. They weren't wearing helmets. Their faces were contorted in rictus masks of rage and grief. They were shouting names of traitors long dead. Horus Lupercal, traitor. They are lost, Lamartine said quietly. They do not see us. They see the siege of Terra. They see their father dying. Alucard watched them. He saw the madness in their eyes. It wasn't the chaotic madness of Thruskell. It was a tragic looping sorrow, a grief so profound it had broken time. They are trapped in a single moment of perfect loss, Alucard observed, living it over and over. How do you live with it? Alucard asked, turning to the chaplain. Knowing this is your future, that every blood angel might end up in this room. Lamartine looked at his fallen brothers. Faith, purpose. We honor them by giving them a death that matters. He looked at Alucard, his bionic eye whirring. You weaponize your curse, vampire. We sanctify ours. Perhaps the result is the same. Perhaps, Alucard said. He turned to leave. He had a date with an ancient civilization of death machines. But as he walked away, he felt a strange kinship with the men in black armor. He knew what it was like to be trapped in a nightmare of blood. The only difference was he had learned to enjoy the dream. Fight well, Monster Lamartine called out. Die well, Angel, Alucard replied. Alara Vance watched the Thunderhawk launch from the viewing deck. The Blood Angels were descending into the atmosphere, a rain of red fire. Alucard's transport peeled off toward the dead moon of Morgalis Secundus. 2 wars, 2 fronts, and 1 vampire caught in the middle. She keyed her comms. Inquisitor, the vampire is away. Deployment confirmed. Good, Valdez replied. Now pray, because if Alucard fails with the Necrons, there won't be a world left to save. Morgalis Secundus was a graveyard of silence. It was a rock stripped of atmosphere, frozen in the vacuum, a perfect monument to entropy. But as Alucard's Thunderhawk touched down on the jagged plateau, overlooking the valley, the graveyard began to wake up. Ensign Alara Vance watched the telemetry from the Righteous Fury. The energy spikes coming from the planet were off the charts. They weren't chaotic like the warp or biological like the Tyrannids. They were mathematical, perfect geometric waves of energy that terrified her with their precision. Ground forces engaging Colonel Terrace of the Imperial Guard reported over the Vox, his voice tinny with static. They just keep coming. We hit them with last cannons, they fall, and then the metal, it flows back together. They stand up and keep shooting. Alucard walked down the ramp into the thin artificial atmosphere generated by the guard's void shield generators. Below him, the valley floor was a sea of green light. Thousands of skeletal figures marched in perfect lockstep. No war cries, no hesitation, just the rhythmic thud, thud, thud of metal feet on stone. "You're the specialist," Colonel Terrace spat, eyeing Alucard's coat. "You don't look like much against 15,000 deathless machines." "Appearances deceive," Alucard replied, adjusting his glasses. "Hold the line here. I'm going in." "Going in? There's an army down there." "I work better alone." Alucard didn't charge. He simply stepped off the cliff edge and dissolved into a swarm of bats and shadow, flowing down the canyon walls like spilled ink. He materialized behind the Necron lines right at the entrance of the massive obsidian tomb structure. The Necron warriors were terrifying up close. Skeletal automata of living metal, their eyes burning with soulless green fire. One turned, detecting the anomaly. It raised a Gauss flare, a weapon that didn't shoot bullets, but stripped atoms from reality. Foom! A beam of green light slashed through the space where Alucard stood. He phased into mist, dodging the shot, but the rock wall behind him vanished. It wasn't blown up. It was simply unmade, erased from existence. "Okay," Alucard muttered, reforming. "That's new." He drew the jackal and fired. The blessed round hit the warrior's center mass. The machine exploded, parts scattering, but before the echo died, the metal began to crawl. Liquid silver flowed across the ground, pulling the skeleton back together. In 5 seconds, the warrior stood up, weapon raised. "Self-repair." Alucard sighed. Of course. Why make it easy? He realized then that violence was futile. He could kill 100, maybe 1,000. But there were 15,000 of them, and they wouldn't stay dead. The Imperium couldn't win this by attrition. So Alucard holstered his guns. He phased through the next volley of Gauss fire and walked straight into the darkness of the tomb. The interior was a labyrinth of impossible geometry. Walls of black stone hummed with power that had been dormant for 60 million years. Alucard moved deeper past rows of sleeping constructs and scuttling scarabs until he reached the heart of the complex. The throne room was vast, lit by the pulsing green light of a massive energy core, and sitting on a throne of living metal was a figure draped in a tattered ancient cape. Overlord Zandre of the dynasty. The Overlord stood as Alucard entered. He was taller than the warriors, his metal body ornate, etched with gold glyphs. He held a staff that crackled with cosmic energy. "Anomaly detected," Zandre said. His voice was mechanical grinding, yet it carried an inflection of weary nobility. "Biological signature negative. Warp contamination partial. You defy categorization." "I'm unique," Alucard said, stopping 20 feet from the throne. "Tends to confuse the paperwork." "I am Overlord Zandre," the machine announced. "I have commanded legions for 60 million years, and I have never seen a being like you. Undead yet vital, immortal yet conscious." "I was human," once Alucard admitted. "I became this, a monster serving a purpose." Zandre descended the dais. He didn't move like a robot. He moved like a king who had forgotten what it felt like to have skin. I remember flesh, the Overlord whispered, the audio synthesizers modulating to simulate sadness. I remember the sun on my face. I remember breathing. Now, I am a ghost in a machine. We defeated Death Vampire and lost everything that made life worth living. Then why wake up? Alucard asked. Why march on the surface? The Silent King commands it. We must reclaim our domain. The younger races, this Imperium, infest our worlds. They must be removed. Or Alucard said a dangerous idea forming in his mind. We could make a deal. Zandre stopped. Deal we do not treat with vermin. The Imperium has mastered things you've lost, Alucard said quickly. Biology, genetics, flesh crafting. They create warriors from genetic templates. They understand organic life in ways your people forgot eons ago. The Overlord went still. Explain. Your cryptechs have tried to reverse biotransference for millions of years, right? Trying to turn metal back into soul. And they failed because they're thinking like machines. Alucard pressed, stepping closer. But the humans, they come at it from the other side. If you combine your technology with their biological mastery, restoration might be possible. Restoration, Zandre repeated the word. It sounded like a prayer to be alive again. I can facilitate it, Alucard promised. I'm the bridge. I'm dead but alive. I'm the proof that consciousness can exist between states. Stop the attack. Talk to the Inquisitor. And maybe, just maybe, you get your soul back. Orbit sighed on the bridge of the righteous fury. Valdez stared at the comms unit as if it had grown fangs. You want me to negotiate with a Necron overlord, she hissed. It's that or fight 15,000 immortals. Alucard's voice came back calm and reasonable. He's listening, Inquisitor. Say hello. Valdez took a breath. Alara watched the Inquisitor's hands tremble before she clasped them behind her back. Overlord Zandre Valdez, said her voice steady. If you halt your advance, the Imperium is prepared to discuss an exchange of information regarding biological restoration. Acceptable, the machine voice replied instantly. My tomb will enter dormancy, but the vampire remains as collateral. He understands both our conditions. Done, Alucard said. The tension on the bridge broke like a fever. Ilara slumped in her chair. They had done it. They had stopped a Necron invasion with a phone call. But in the 41st millennium, peace is just the deep breath before the scream. Sir, the sensor officer yelled. New contacts translating in system. Energy spikes. These aren't Necron. They're Eldar. Dark Eldar. Valdez's face went pale. Drukhari. Raiding fleet, the officer confirmed. 20 vessels. Fast attack configuration. They're bypassing the planet. They're heading for the vampire's coordinates. Alucard heard the report in the tomb. They're here for me, he realized. Intercepted comms. They know about the regeneration. They want a specimen. The dark Eldar, Zandre's voice filled with ancient cold hatred, the twisted kin of our old enemies. They are worse than the Tyranids. They do not just consume. They torture for sustenance. They're landing, Alucard said. If I stay here, they'll turn this sector into a slaughterhouse trying to dig me out. Then we fight, Zandre said, hefting his staff. My royal court is awake. We will assist. No, Alucard said. That's a war of attrition you can't afford if you want your research. He looked at the ancient machine. I have a better idea. One that gets us the biological data we need and gets them off the planet. You cannot mean. I'm going to surrender, Alucard said, a dark smile playing on his lips. They want me in Camarog, fine. I'll go. I'll turn their city into my classroom. He opened a Vox channel to the approaching raiders. Archon, this is the vampire. Call off your dogs. I'm coming out. Alucard no Valdez screamed over the link. That is a one-way trip to hell. They will torture you for centuries. It's a field trip, Inquisitor Alucard replied, walking toward the tomb entrance where the sleek-bladed skiffs of the Dark Eldar were already descending. And besides, the Necrons need biological experts. Who knows flesh better than the homunculi? He walked out into the open. The lead raider, Archon Seleth, stood on the deck of her Ravager, beautiful and terrible. You're making a mistake, creature, she purred, her eyes hungry. You think you can survive the Dark City. I think, Alucard said, offering his hands to the manacles, that I'm going to be the most expensive guest you've ever hosted. As they dragged him onto the skiff, Alucard looked back at the Necron overlord standing in the shadows of the tomb. 1 month, Alucard shouted. I'll be back in 1 month with your cure, or I'll be dead. Either way, keep the peace. The skiff shot into the sky, vanishing into a webway portal that tore the fabric of reality apart. Alara watched the signal disappear. He's gone, she whispered. He actually went to Camara. Valdez stared at the blank screen. He just traded his soul for a ceasefire, she said quietly. God Emperor help him, because nothing else can. Camara was not a city. It was a wound in the side of reality that refused to bleed out. Alucard stepped out of the webway portal and immediately tasted the air. It was thick, oily, and tasted of copper and ozone, the psychic residue of billions of souls, screaming in unison. The sky above was a bruising purple nebula, churned by the contrails of razor-wing jet fighters dog-fighting for sport. The architecture defied physics. Spires of black crystal hung upside down from the cloud layer, connected by bridges made of solidified shadow and bone. Welcome to the Dark City, Archon Seleth, said her voice silky with pride. She gestured to the skyline where 1,000 jagged towers pierced the gloom. Population trillions, crime rate absolute, mortality rate irrelevant. Alucard adjusted his coat, which felt woefully inadequate against the psychic chill. You live in a giant torture chamber, he noted, watching a barge float by draped in flayed skins that still twitched. We live in a banquet hall, Seleth corrected, her eyes black pits of hunger. We are cursed vampire, Slanesh. She who thirsts drains our souls, drop by drop. To survive, to fill the void, we must consume the suffering of others. Pain is our currency. Screams are our music. She turned to him, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. And you are the richest commodity we have seen in 10,000 years. An immortal who regenerates you are an all-you-can-eat buffet. They traveled via anti-grav raider to the Tower of Prophets, the domain of the Homunculi, the master fleshcrafters of the Drukhari. The tower looked like it had been grown rather than built, a spiral of organic cartilage and weeping metal. Inside, the horror was clinical. Alucard walked past transparent vats containing things that used to be people. He saw an orc kept alive while being dissected layer by layer, its eyes following them with impotent rage. He saw a human woman whose nervous system had been extracted and spread out like a spiderweb, trembling with every vibration in the room. My collection, a voice rasped. Urian Raykarth floated toward them. The master homunculus was a nightmare of surgical modification. He had no legs hovering on a spinal column tail. Multiple mechanical arms sprouted from his back, each ending in a scalpel, a syringe, or a sensor probe. His skin was pale as alabaster, stretched tight over a skull that seemed too large for his face. A vampire Rakarth murmured, his sensors whirring as they scanned Alucard. "I have read of such myths. Tell me, do you feel pain?" Extensively, Alucard replied, keeping his hands away from his guns. Good Rakarth smiled, and it was a terrible thing to witness. Then we have much to teach each other. Back in real space, on the bridge of the Righteous Fury Ensign, Alara Vance sat at the long-range comms station, her headset pressed so tight against her ears it hurt. It had been 3 weeks of silence from the sector's most dangerous asset. "Any signal?" Valdez asked, her voice tight. She stood behind Alara's chair, staring at the static on the main screen. "Negative, Inquisitor. The webway gate on Morgalis Secundus is dormant," Alara reported. She hesitated. "But we are picking up an encrypted burst from the Blade of Sanguinius." Valdez stiffened. "Put it on speakers." "Inquisitor," the voice of Commander Dante filled the bridge. "We are launching a rescue operation. Chaplain Lamartes has identified a breach point into the webway. We are going to retrieve the asset." "Belay that order," Valdez shouted. The vampire went willingly. "You will destabilize the entire sector. He is an Imperial asset trapped in hell." Dante replied, his tone brooking no argument. "We do not leave warriors behind. The extraction force is already inbound." Alara watched the tactical display as a cluster of red icons, Blood Angel strike teams, vanished from the sensor grid. They had entered the webway. "They're going to get themselves killed," Alara whispered, "and they're going to ruin everything." The arena in Kamara was a bowl of noise and blood. Thousands of Drukhari filled the tiered stands, a kaleidoscope of sadistic colors. They cheered, they jeered, and they bet heavily on how many times the guest of honor would die. Alucard stood on the bloody sand, checking the action on the jackal. He had already died 32 times this month. He had been dissolved by acid, flayed by neural whips, and bisected by monofilament nets. Each time he came back, and each time the crowd roared louder. "He is subverting the purpose," Selith complained from her luxury box. "He fights politely." "He is demonstrating control," Rakarth countered, watching intently. "He dies only when he chooses. It is a power move." The gates opposite Alucard ground open. The crowd screamed in anticipation, but it wasn't a monster that emerged. It was a space marine. He wore the battered yellow and black armor of the Marine's Malevolent. His helmet was gone, revealing a face scarified by weeks of torture. He held a chainsword that sputtered with low fuel. Brother Corvin, Alucard said, recognizing the prisoner Rakarth had mentioned. "Captured 3 months ago, 17 wins." Corvin looked at Alucard, confused. "You're not Eldar. What are you—" "Another prisoner," Alucard lied. "Let's give them a show." The Marine charged. He didn't have a choice. Collar bombs ensured compliance. His chainsword swung for Alucard's neck. Alucard didn't dodge. He took the hit. The teeth of the chainsword chewed through his collarbone, spraying blood across the sand. The crowd erupted. Alucard staggered back, gripping the wound. As it knit together in seconds, steam rising from the flesh. Thrown, Corvin gasped, backing away. "You're regenerating." "Yeah, it's a neat trick," Alucard grimaced, rolling his new shoulder. "Your turn. Can you take a gut shot?" I am, Astartes, Corvin growled. Good. Alucard raised the cassol and fired. He didn't aim for the head. He aimed for the abdominal plating. The round punched through, knocking the Marine flat, but missing the vitals. They fought for 20 minutes. It was a brutal, bloody ballet. They carved each other apart, inflicting horrific but survivable wounds. To the crowd, it was a frenzy. To the combatants, it was a conversation. "Why are you helping me?" Corvin grunted, parrying a blow. "I'm Marine's malevolent. We aren't liked." "Because we're the only two things in this room that have souls," Alucard replied, shooting a Kroot mercenary that had been released into the fray to spice things up. The fight ended when a massive, grotesque Frankenstein's monster of muscle and steroid injectors charged them. Alucard and Corvin fought back to back. Alucard unleashed his shadows, the Baskerville Hound, manifesting to tear the grotesque's throat out while Corvin severed its legs. When the beast fell, the crowd fell silent. They had wanted the Marine to die. Instead, the two warriors stood amidst the gore, breathing hard, alive. "Get out of here," Alucard whispered to Corvin as the guards moved in to drag them back to the cells. "When I leave, I'm taking you with me." Later in Rakarth's lab, the homunculus was ecstatic. The Data Rakarth chirped his mechadendrites dancing over a hololith. "Your regeneration, it is not biological. It is a cascade of soul energy. You use the millions of souls you have consumed as a battery to rewrite your physical form." Alucard sat on the slab shirtless, watching his own skin stitched together. "Glad I could help. Now about the Necrons." Yes, the transaction." Rakarth wheeled over to a large stasis vat. Inside floated a body. It looked human, but too perfect. The skin was translucent, showing organs that glowed with faint green light. "I have done it," Rakarth announced. "I have transferred a Necron consciousness, harvested from a damaged warrior, into a biological template, using your distributed consciousness model as a guide." He pressed a rune. The figure in the vat opened its eyes. They were green mechanical, but the tear ducts were working. "Where am I?" the figure croaked. The voice was wet, unused to air. "You are alive," Alucard said, stepping up to the glass. "You were a machine. Now you breathe." The figure raised a hand, staring at the fingerprints. "I feel cold. I feel the fluid against my skin. It is overwhelming." Tears leaked from its eyes, dissolving into the suspension fluid. "I remember crying. I had forgotten." See, Rakarth gloated. "It works! Incomplete, unstable. It will expire in days. But it works." The homunculus reached for a lever. Data collected, terminating subject for autopsy. Alucard grabbed Rakarth's wrist. His grip was like iron. "Don't," Alucard warned. "Let him sleep. Let him die naturally." Rakarth looked at the vampire, amused. Sentimentality from a monster. "Professional courtesy," Alucard growled. Before the argument could escalate, alarms blared throughout the spire. "Intruders," Selith's voice cut over the vox. "Space Marines. They have breached the Webway Gate. They are in the district." Alucard swore. The rescue party. He ran. He didn't wait for permission. He bolted through the labyrinthine corridors of the tower, bursting out into the smog-choked street. In the distance he saw the flashes of bolter fire. A squad of blood angels, led by Chaplain Lamartes and young brother Cassius, was holding a defensive line in a ruined plaza. They were surrounded by hundreds of Kabbalite warriors. They were dying. "Cease fire!" Alucard roared, his voice amplified by magic. He jumped from the tower landing in the center of the kill zone, right between the Blood Angels and the Dark Eldar. Vampire Lamarte shouted, swinging his crozius to deflect a splinter rifle shot. "We are here, move to the extraction point." "Stop," Alucard ordered, turning to face the Blood Angels. "You have to go back." Cassius looked at him, blood streaming from a wound in his helmet. "What, we came for you? We fought through hell to get here." "And you're ruining the deal," Alucard shouted back. "I am here as a guest. If you extract me by force, the agreement ends. The research stops. The Necrons don't get their cure. The prisoners don't get released." "You are defending them." Cassius looked horrified. "They are monsters." "I know what they are," Alucard snarled. "But I need what they know. I have 1 week left on my contract. If I leave now, everything I suffered for is wasted." He walked up to Lamarte's, ignoring the Dark Eldar weapons trained on him. "Chaplain, look at me. I gave my word. I swore on my name. If you drag me out of here, you make me a liar, and you doom the souls I'm trying to save." Lamarte stared at him. The battle raged silently around them, a pause in the violence. The chaplain looked at the vampire's eyes. He saw the torture. He saw the resolve. "You voluntarily choose to remain in this place?" Lamarte's asked. "For 1 more week," Alucard said. "Then I come home, with the data, and with Brother Corvin." Lamarte's lowered his weapon. "This is insanity." "This is duty," Alucard corrected. "Very well," Lamartes nodded slowly. "We will withdraw, but if you do not return in 7 days, we will burn this city to the ground." "Deal." As the Blood Angels retreated back into the webway, Archon Seleth stepped from the shadows, clapping slowly. Touching, she sneered. "You sent your rescuers away to honor a contract with devils. You really are adapting to Kamara Vampire." "I didn't do it for you," Alucard said, watching the portal close. "I did it because I'm not leaving until I get what I paid for." He turned back to the Tower of Prophets, back to the torture, back to the arena. 1 more week in hell. 1 month to the second. Ensign Alara Vance stared at the chronometer on her console. The red digits flickered. 29 days, 23 hours, 59 minutes. The bridge of the righteous fury was silent. It was the silence of a held breath of 100 people, waiting to see if a monster kept his word, or if they were about to be boarded by a Comorrigan raiding party. "Energy spike detected," the sensor officer whispered. "Morgulus tertius surface. The webway gate is active." "Security teams to the hangar," Inquisitor Valdez ordered. Her voice was steady, but Alara saw her hand grip the railing until the metal groaned. "Containment protocols stand by." Alara switched her monitor to the hangar feed. The air in the bay shimmered, warping like heat haze over asphalt. Reality tore open. It wasn't a clean door, it was a jagged wound in the universe, bleeding purple light and the sound of distant, agonizing screams. 2 figures stepped through. The first was Alucard. His red coat was tattered, stained with fluids that were definitely not human blood. He walked with a slight limp that vanished after 2 steps, his regeneration forcing his body back into alignment. He looked thinner, his features sharpened by a month of hell, but his eyes were burning with a terrifying clarity. The second figure was slumped against him, supported by the vampire's arm. A space marine in battered yellow and black armor, missing his helmet, his face a ruin of scars and fresh grafts. Brother Corvin Alara breathed. He had done it. He had actually brought him back. The webway gate snapped shut behind them, severing the connection to the dark city. The silence returned, heavier this time. Alucard looked up at the security cameras. He smiled, and for the first time it didn't look mocking. It looked tired. "Honey, I'm home," he rasped. The medical bay was a flurry of activity. Magos Hexus hovered over Alucard, her mechadendrites twitching in agitated rhythms. She stripped him of his coat, revealing a torso that was a map of fresh scars that were fading in real time as the vampire's unnatural vitality scrubbed them away. Subject Vampire Unknown 001. Hexus droned her scanners, bathing him in harsh blue light. Physiological assessment. Deep tissue scans indicate massive trauma history. Cellular memory suggests you have died approximately 32 times. 32, Alucard confirmed, wincing, as a probe touched a particularly sensitive spot on his neck. The crowds were demanding. I aimed to please. Yet, corruption levels are nominal. Hexus continued, her voice rising in binary surprise. No chaotic taint, no biological rewriting by homunculi flesh crafting. Consciousness stable. Demon prince containment intact. I told you, Alucard said, accepting a fresh blood pack from a servo skull. He tore it open and drank greedily. I'm stubborn. Remarkable, Valdez said, stepping into the room. She looked at the data slate Hexus handed her, then at the vampire. 1 month in the Dark City. Voluntary exposure to the most depraved civilization in the galaxy. And you come back clean. Clean is a strong word. Inquisitor Alucard wiped his mouth. I've seen things I can't unsee. Learned truths I can't unlearn. Camera leaves marks even on those it doesn't break. He sat up, swinging his legs off the table. But I have the deliverables. He reached into his coat, which someone had miraculously patched, and pulled out a crystalline data shard. It pulsed with a sickly green inner light. Biotransference reversal, Alucard said, tossing the shard to Valdez. She caught it, looking at it as if it were a grenade. Urian Rakarth successfully transferred a Necron consciousness into a biological template. It was incomplete. The subject only lived for a few days, but it worked. He felt, he cried, he lived. Valdez stared at the crystal. This is galaxy-changing. If the Necrons can return to flesh, then they stop being a plague of deathless machines and start being a species with something to lose, Alucard finished. Overlord Zandre's restoration is achievable. It will take centuries of refinement, but the path is open. And the Marine, Valdez asked. Brother Corvin is with the Blood Angels now, Alucard said softly. Broken but breathing. Chaplain Lamartes is grateful. Grateful, Valdez scoffed, though a small smile touched her lips. That's one word for it. They're calling you the honorable monster in the mess hall. I've been called worse. You've changed, Alucard, Valdez said, her expression sobering. She stepped closer, looking into his eyes. Subtle, but present. Your eyes carry weight they didn't before. I realized something, Alucard said, standing up. He towered over her, a pillar of darkness and blood. The 41st millennium is a nightmare, but it's just darkness. And darkness can be understood. It can be survived. It can even be used. He adjusted his glasses. I'm still a monster inquisitor, but I'm your monster. That hasn't changed. Good, Valdez said. The warmth vanished from her voice, replaced by the cold steel of command. Because while you were playing Gladiator, the galaxy didn't stop burning. She walked to the wall monitor and keyed a command. The screen flickered to life, showing a star map of the subsector. A massive, swirling, angry red bruise was dominating the upper quadrant. A warp storm, Alucard noted. Big one? Massive, Valdez corrected, growing by the day, potentially large enough to isolate this entire subsector from the rest of the Imperium, cut off billions from the Astronomican's light, leave them vulnerable to incursion. Natural phenomenon. Intelligence suggests deliberate manufacture, Valdez said grimly. Something is creating it, something that wants us trapped in a cage match. She swiped the screen. A grainy pic capture appeared. It was blurry, taken from a long-range auger, but the subject was unmistakable. A figure wreathed in brass and fire, wings of smoke and blood, an axe that looked large enough to cleave a tank in half. Alucard felt a lurch in his gut. Not his gut, his mind. Thrasgul, the demon prince, locked in his skull, slammed against the bars of his prison. Master the demon whispered, "He comes." Angron Alucard breathed. The Red Angel, Daemon Primarch of the World Eaters. Confirmed, Valdez said. He is leading a war band into this sector. 12,000 Chaos Space Marines. Demon engines. A fleet that could challenge a sector battle fleet. And... She hesitated, looking at Alucard with genuine fear. Intelligence suggests he is specifically asking about you. Me, the vampire who consumed Thrasgul Valdez, clarified. Angron was Thrasgul's master before his ascension. He knows his servant is inside you, and he wants him back. The room went cold. Ilara Vance, listening from the monitoring station, felt her blood freeze. A Primarch, a son of the Emperor, turned into a god of slaughter, and he was coming here specifically for the man standing in front of her. This is bad, Alucard said, the understatement hanging in the air. It is apocalyptic, Valdez snapped. A demon Primarch is a strategic-level threat. They end civilization single-handedly. We cannot fight him. We need to evacuate you, get you out of the sector before he arrives. No, Alucard said instantly. This isn't a negotiation, Valdez shouted. You are an asset. If Angron takes you, if he rips Thrasgul out of you, he gains a demon prince and we lose our only weapon against the warp. I've run from nothing for 5 centuries, Alucard said, his voice low and dangerous. I'm not starting now. This is suicide. This is opportunity, Alucard countered. He walked to the map, studying the red smear of the approaching fleet. I've gotten stronger, Inquisitor. Since arriving here, I've consumed a demon prince. I've survived the Tyranid hive mind. I've learned from the Dark Eldar. I am not the same thing that landed 3 months ago. He turned to her, his eyes glowing with a challenge. Maybe I'm strong enough to face a Primarch now. Or maybe you're arrogant, Valdez said, but she didn't look away. And about to make a fatal mistake. If we run, he follows, Alucard argued. He burns world after world until he catches me. Billions die. But if we stand, if we draw him in... We die, Valdez said flatly, alone. Not alone, Alucard smiled. It was a shark's smile. We have the Blood Angels. We have the Imperial Guard. And I have a Necron overlord who owes me a favor. Valdez stared at him. You want to assemble a coalition. Imperials, Astartes, Necrons, maybe even Dark Eldar knowledge. A grand alliance, Alucard agreed. To kill a god. Valdez looked at the map, then at the vampire. She saw the madness in it, the sheer, unadulterated heresy of working with Xenos to fight chaos. But she also saw the alternative. Angron, unchecked, slaughtering his way to Terra. If Angron wants a war, Valdez whispered, let's give him one he won't forget. She hit the comms button. Bridge, general quarters. Open a channel to Commander Dante and Overlord Zandre. Tell them the vampire has a plan. Alucard walked to the viewport. The stars were out there cold and distant, but the red stain of the warp storm was getting closer. He could feel the rage radiating from it. The Emperor protects Valdez, muttered, watching the fleet mobilization orders scroll across her slate. Alucard chuckled, the sound dark and rich in the quiet room. The Emperor protects Alucard, repeated, but monsters attack. 3 days later, the Morgellus system looked less like a sector of space and more like an open wound in the concept of peace. Ensign Alara Vance stood at the main viewport of the Righteous Fury. Her hands were clasped behind her back, mimicking the posture she had seen Inquisitor Valdez hold 1,000 times. She wasn't trembling anymore. The fear that had defined her existence for the last 3 months had burned away, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Outside the glass, the void was crowded. The Imperial Navy was there, a line of battlecruisers, stretching for kilometers, their prows jagged with lance batteries. The Blood Angels' strike fleet formed a crimson spearhead, the blade of Sanguinius gleaming like a drop of holy blood against the darkness. But it was the flank that drew the eye. Emerging from the shadow of Morgellus Secundus came the Necrons, 7 crescent-shaped tomb ships, silent and terrifyingly geometric, drifted into formation alongside the Imperial vessels. They didn't hail the fleet, they didn't broadcast codes. They simply took their position, their green energy signatures, humming in harmony with the blue drive plumes of the human ships. It was impossible. It was heresy. It was the only chance they had. Sector-wide Vox check, complete, the comms officer reported. All ships reporting ready. Overlord Zandre signals. Compliance. Alara looked at the reflection in the glass. She saw herself older, harder. She saw the crew working with grim efficiency. And behind her she saw the monster. Alucard stood by the tactical table. He was fully armed, the Castle and Jackal gleaming under the bridge lights. He had really fed on the bloodstocks Hexus had prepared. He radiated power that made the air shimmer around him. You realize, Valdez said, standing beside him, that if we survive this, the High Lords of Terra will have me executed for sanctioning a Xenos alliance. If we survive this, Alucard replied, checking the slide on his gun, the High Lords won't have a sector left to govern without you. I think they'll get over it. Angron is a force of nature, Alucard. He is hate incarnate. He doesn't just kill, he unmakes. I know, Alucard said. Thraskel won't shut up about him. He tapped his temple. The Demon Prince is terrified. He remembers the World Eaters. He remembers the slaughter. And you, Valdez asked, are you terrified? Alucard stopped. He looked at the massive fleet assembling outside. He looked at the Necron ships, the Blood Angels, the millions of human souls preparing to throw themselves into the meat grinder. In my world, Alucard said softly, I was the only monster. I walked through history unchallenged. I got bored. He turned to her, and his smile was wide, feral, and absolutely terrifying. But here, a galaxy of endless war demons, aliens, gods of slaughter. He laughed, a low rumble that vibrated through the deck plates. Inquisitor, I'm not terrified. I'm home. The alarms blared, the specific screaming tone of a proximity breach. Contact, Alara yelled, her voice steady and clear. Warp translation detected massive scale. It's the World Eater's fleet. They're entering real space. The void ahead tore open. It wasn't a clean tear, it was a hemorrhage. Reality screamed as ships covered in brass and bone dragged themselves out of the warp. They were bleeding smoke, trailing madness. And at the center of the formation was a vessel the size of a city, the Conqueror. "All ships," Valdez roared. "Weapons, free, engage." Alucard walked to the center of the bridge. He didn't look at the tactical screens. He looked straight ahead, into the abyss. "Alara," he said, using her name for the first time. She froze. "Sir." "Open a channel, wide band, to the enemy fleet." "Sir, that's strictly against protocol." "Do it." Alara keyed the command. Channel open. Alucard leaned toward the pickup. "Angron," he shouted. His voice amplified across the void carried by the screaming physics of the 41st millennium. "I heard you were looking for your dog. Come and get him." On the tactical display, the massive enemy flagship shifted. It ignored the Navy. It ignored the Blood Angels. It turned its prow directly toward the righteous fury. "He's coming," Valdez whispered. "Good," Alucard said. His shadow stretched out, darkening the entire bridge, filling the room with hundreds of red eyes that opened in the gloom. The monster was off the leash. "Let's see if a god bleeds." The fleets collided, the stars vanished behind walls of fire, and Alucard, the no-life king, the bird of Hermes, laughed as he plunged into the eternal war. This wasn't the end. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is no end. There is only the next fight. And Alucard was just getting started.